every single day and to speak, but doing something like this is quite nerve-wracking for me because it's not talking about CrossFit, it's talking about me and what I've done. So please bear with me. I am a little bit nervous, but I'm going to try and tell my story as best I can.
Come on, Kate.
So I'm a swimmer, or I'm a retired swimmer. My story I've obviously told people I know about, and a few people, like Em says, has said you should tell that more, or you should write it down, you should write blogs on it. And it's weird because for me it's just me and it's just my life and what I've done. But if I can tell you guys my story, and hopefully you could go away and take one thing from it, or it might inspire or whatever, I'll just be really happy about that. So here goes. So my story starts when I was 9. I joined a swimming club, Stockport Metro, and I love swimming. Like, my friends will tell me now, we go on holiday and even when we're just playing in the water, apparently I just look really at home in water, which is massively true. I just love it. So long story short, back then I joined the club, eventually progressed through to national level. It was pretty much my life. I was training 23 hours a week alongside school. I was swimming 80,000 metres a week. I obviously loved it. A lot of people used to say, like, does your mum and dad have to get you up in the morning because we'd be up at 4, going training 2 hours before school, 2 hours or 3 hours after school. And I never used to get woken up by my parents. I was always the one that got myself up. I used to go and wake my mum and dad up to take me because it was literally my life. I wanted to go to the Olympics, and that's what I was training for. I trained up until I was 15, like that. I went to nationals, won medals at nationals. If you've ever heard of Becky Adlington, we were rivals. I was a distance swimmer, so we were rivals. She was at a different club, and we would basically switch around being number 1 and 2 in the UK for our age, and it would be like, well, who's going to get it this time, kind of thing. Over the course of 2 years, so from age 13 to 15, or 13 and a half to 15 and a half, I had a number of setbacks. So when I was 13, I went to British trials, and they told me that if I came first or second in my events, then I would be going to the European Youth Olympics, which were going to be in Paris, and it was going to be like the biggest competition of my life. I came second in both my events, so it was pretty set that I was going to be going to Paris. And then the deciders contacted my coach and said, you might want to have a chat because we've had a little bit of a rule change. So actually we normally take 8 girls and 8 boys, and we're not sure that Emma's going to get in this time. So he had a chat with me, and I was like, okay, a bit disappointing, but never mind. And then I got a letter in the post saying, congratulations, you've been selected for the team, you're going to go into Paris, you're going to get the Olympic kit, all of that. It was like the best day ever. I went to school, told all my friends, and then my mum and dad came into school that morning, and they'd had a call from British Swimming saying the letter was sent as a mistake. Yeah, so it was pretty heartbreaking. But to be fair, apparently my response when my mum, they brought me into the head teacher's office, you know, and you're like, oh my God, what's happened? My response was, oh my God, thank God, I thought someone had died. So that was obviously heartbreaking. And then about a year later, I got septic tonsillitis, which had me out of the pool for 3 months. I was pretty poorly with that. Then a year later, or 6 months later, I broke my elbow, which took me a while to get back from, and 6 months after that, I broke my wrist. So, you know, I'm literally just like, oh my God, one thing after another. And every time I was getting back in the pool and trying to train, if I couldn't get in the pool for injury, I was in the gym every day on my own, like age 14, just doing it by myself while my coach was on poolside. And then I went into my final year at school. See, I feel like I'm telling you like my whole life story. I went into my final year at school, and my parents split up, which obviously I've got my GCSEs going on, I'm trying to train full time for British Swimming. That was a real kick in the teeth, and that was in the January. And then I was spending week on week trying to still train 10 times a week, and then I was getting poorly. Obviously I was running down, struggling with a lot. What I now know, years later, is my coach, who was meant to be my guidance and my support, was also a struggling alcoholic. So he wasn't really supporting me like he should have. Every time I got poorly, he would just put me straight back in the pool. And then I had like blood tests, everything came back okay. You know, we just like, what is going on? Nothing's working. And then one morning I turned up, and he turned around to me and said, I think you should think about taking up something else because I don't see the point anymore. And that for me was like, wow. And then I got in and swam a full 2-hour session crying. So then that was literally just before my GCSEs. So I decided to take a break over my GCSEs. To put it into perspective, I was in his squad and I was 15 and everybody else in the group was in the 20s and were full-time athletes, didn't have school, and I was the youngest, I was the baby. And I think my coach used to forget that I was still at school. So I went and had a meeting with him after my GCSEs in my school uniform to sort of remind him how old I was. And he, obviously, now I know, we're now friends, so it's fine, but now I know he was going through a lot, but we didn't know that at the time. And he just said, I don't think you're going to come back. So obviously when your person that you sort of look up to says that and doesn't believe in you, then it's easy then to not believe in yourself. And I didn't go back. So that was what I thought was the end of my swimming career. I went to college, I went to uni, I swam at uni, but there were definitely more beers than swimming at uni. It was great, loved it, they were my family, the swimming team. It did take me a couple of years, I realise now, to sort of get over that, and I felt like I completely lost my identity because I was a swimmer. That's it, like, it's not it, and I now know that, but at the time I definitely struggled to know what I was then going to do. So, next chapter, graduated from uni, started working in recruitment. Hired me, she was my interviewer, so that's how we met. While we were working in recruitment, her and my other friend Danny, they were doing CrossFit, and at the time they said, we think you should join, we think you'll love it, and I was like, no, I don't feel like that. I don't think I'll like weightlifting. And then she started doing a boot camp, I started doing boot camp, and then it progressed to doing CrossFit outside, and eventually, obviously, I loved it, was hooked, and started doing CrossFit. And that was in 2010. 3 years later, I started working in a CrossFit gym, which was ace. I wasn't a coach, I was customer service, that sort of stuff. And I was fully into that way of life. And I was training CrossFit all the time. And then in 2014, we had a motorbike accident, which I know Emma's going to go over.
I'll just touch on it.
Just touch on it, yeah. Might have something to do with injury. So we had a motorbike accident in 2014 while we were on holiday, which was obviously pretty devastating, and Emma was really injured. I was injured, but nowhere near as bad. And that same year, a few months later, an old swimming friend got in touch and said, swim for Cheshire Masters and we're short on swimmers. Would you like to help us out and come down and compete with us? And I was a bit like, I've not swam properly in like 10 years, but I do CrossFit, so why not? I'll give it a go. I reckon I can hold my own in the pool. So I didn't do any swimming training, I just carried on doing CrossFit, went down to the competition on the day, and the first race was a relay, and I went in the middle of a relay, so if you know kind of what that means, it means I won't know what time I've done when I get in, because it's like a full team thing. So we did the relay, we did really well, got out, and someone was like going through our splits, and they were like, you did this time, you did that time. They looked at me, said my time, and it was a lifetime PB. And I was like, you need to calculate that, that's not right. And then she looked and she was like, no, this is it. And I was like, I've just PB'd having done no swimming training. And I was like, what was I doing all them years ago? But that's what CrossFit had done. It had made me stronger, more powerful, and I guess I had no pressure on myself either when I went in. I just loved racing again. So while I was there on that day, I went on to PB 2 or 3 more races as well, and it was just amazing, I couldn't believe it. And there was talk then of me getting back in, but as a master. So masters in swimming, it sounds really old. In swimming, 25 and above is classed as a master. So yeah, I was just in masters, I was 25, I think 26. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll give this a shot. I thought if I join Trafford Masters, which is obviously down in Sale, and carry on with my CrossFit, I want to see where this goes, because one of the coaches there was saying, you know, that time that you just did there would stand you in really good stead at Masters Nationals in next summer. So I was like, what have I got to lose? So I thought, why not? So I joined the club, I started swimming 3 times a week, which is much nicer than 10 times a week, which is what I was used to, and I was doing CrossFit 5 times a week. And over the course of that year I was building up to Nationals, which was in the June. And I went and competed at Nationals, and I think I did 9 events, and I got 9 medals. And I also broke a British record, which was just amazing. And standing on the podium and hearing them announce in a British record time, like, I'll never forget that day. I had loads of my friends in the crowd, and it was just ace. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I'm like 10 years out of the water. While I was there, my times qualified me for the World Masters Championships, which were in August in Kazan in Russia. So obviously I went, I had to pay money, and I got some sponsorship from people, which was amazing. Em came with me, and my other friend Emma, because apparently I only hang out with people called Emma. They came with me as support, which I'm obviously always grateful for. So yeah, I went to Kazan, and in the build up to it, like a lot of people were like, were you nervous? And I was like, I was just so excited. Like, I couldn't describe the feeling on the morning of waking up knowing I was flying out there to compete. Was just unreal, and I just remember being so excited and feeling like I'd done everything I could in my power to know that I was prepared to go into this competition. Like, I worked really hard, I made sure I ate well, I made sure I got enough sleep, that sort of stuff. And then when I went to Kazan, I sort of felt like I was ready. I had 5 events in Kazan, and talking about sort of how pressure could get to you, the call room before the races was ridiculous. I'd never been in such an environment, like on the international circuit. The pressure in there was mental. Like, you're in there for about half an hour before your event. Everyone in there is obviously looking around, thinking, who's my competition, looking around. I just had my headphones in, I had my race playlist on, I was doing my sort of CrossFit style walk, because that's what I knew. And what I had in my head was, these guys are swimmers, but I do CrossFit. And that was motivating me. I was like, I've got something else here. And I felt like that was motivating me, that was giving me some confidence. And the other thing I was using, so talking about using hard times to push you, was that my coach didn't believe in me. And I was thinking, I'm going to show him what I'm capable of. So like, the adrenaline was high, but I managed to, this is going to sound really weird, I managed to learn how to control my heart rate and my adrenaline in that call room, because obviously if it spikes too soon, you're then going to have a dip when you race. And weird, it was like I had a button and I just knew how to control it, and then as soon as we walked out the call room onto poolside, I was like, right, go. And then I was like hyped and ready to compete. So my first race was a 100-metre freestyle, and I got in and I just swam as fast as I could. I had no idea what time I was going to do. And I touched the wall and there was a gong, which means winner. And when I turned around, I looked at the board and I'd broken the World Masters record. And I just remember the girl next to me didn't know her, she threw her arms around me and she was like, you just broke the world record! And I was like, ah, it is. It was incredible, and I'll never ever forget that feeling. So went round to my friends, we celebrated, and then it was on a complete high. Like, I had messages on my phone, I couldn't almost deal with it, it was just mental. I had 4 more races to do over the next few days, so I had to almost kind of control that. There were lots of things as well that happened that week that could throw you off. Like, before one of my races, my suit ripped. So, and they take ages to get on, like they take 20 to 30 minutes to get on because they're so tight. So I was putting it on and then I ripped it and I was like, oh my God, I had a spare, thank God, but I was just like, calm, it's fine, you've got plenty of time. It's all about sort of staying in control. Anyway, that week was one of the best weeks of my life. I raced 5 times and I won 3 golds and 2 silvers and broke 3 world records and 4 world records. I finished that week and posted about it on Facebook, and my old coach commented and said, shit, that's fast. We need to talk. And I was like, oh God, what do I do with that? Also, I forgot to say, when I did quit swimming the first time round, I wrote him a really long letter explaining how I felt and saying thank you for everything, and he never responded to it, never got anything back. I'm painting him out to be a bad person. He was going through some tough times, I now know, but at the time I didn't understand. So when he commented this on my Facebook post, I thought, what do I do here? Do I go and meet up with him? And someone told me that my times had qualified me for the Olympic trials, so not masters, actually in the elite in swimming. And I was like, okay, and I was sat on the train home from Russia with them, looking at when Olympic trials was. Turns out they were the same week as one of my best friend's wedding, who I was meant to be bridesmaid for. And so then I had to make a tricky decision, and that comes under a lot of sacrifice that comes into sport. Well, that's another bit later on. So I went and met with my coach, and weirdly it was like meeting up with an ex. Just like, this is weird, I've not seen you for 10 years. And he was a completely different person. Like, I couldn't believe it. He was really positive, really happy, just looked like much better in himself, and we had like the best coffee. He was like, I feel like I owe you. I really want to work with you. I feel like you could go far. And I was like, okay, I'd like to try. And he was like, honestly, I think 2018 Commonwealth, I think you're going to be on that plane. So I was like, wow, when someone's saying that to you, let's give it a go. So I rejoined my old team, which was really weird because that team, all their birthdays, I think, are 2000 plus. And I'm an 89 baby, so I definitely got called grandma age. And rejoined his team and started training 5 times. We compromised, so 5 times a week while I was still doing my CrossFit. And I was like an unusual athlete. Swimmers don't do that. Like, swimmers are like 9-10 times a week. So it was almost like I was a bit of an experiment just to see what was going to happen. And then if you've heard about him, PT, he now does CrossFit style training as well. So it is spreading in swimming. That was in 2015 that I joined there, and the Olympic trials were in the April. I had to re-qualify because my times at Masters didn't count, as in they did count, but they didn't count as qualification. So I had pressure then that I had to try and swim that fast again and try and re-qualify for trials, which I did. And I remember going to Glasgow in 2016 for the Olympic trials thinking, oh my God, what has happened here? Like, this has been a complete whirlwind. I quit swimming 10 years ago and now I'm back in. That just doesn't happen. It's unheard of. So I went and competed at Glasgow, and when I was there, I just thought to myself, this is it. Like, this is your chance to rewrite your story. This is your second chance. Nobody gets a second chance. I was at the 2004 Olympic trials and then the 2016 Olympic trials. And I knew it was going to be close. I actually forgot to say, this time round I'm a sprinter. That time round I was a distance swimmer, so CrossFit had completely changed my ability, my quick, whatever it's called. What's it called?
Fast twitch.
Fast twitch, thanks Chris. I had fast twitch, whereas I didn't have that back then. So at Olympic trials I had the 100 freestyle, the 50 freestyle, the 100 butterfly. They were my 3 events that I was going to compete in, and I knew the freestyle events were my biggest chance. The 50 free, I came 5th, and my time finished me 0.17 seconds away from being considered for Rio. That's like a fingertip, not even that, like a fingernail. So I was like, right, okay, so the 100 free is going to be my chance, and the 100 free is considered a relay event, so they take 4 people for that. So I was like, I've got a chance here. So all my family were there. I was just making sure I was thinking positive, eating all the right things, making sure I was sleeping. I did really well in the heat. PB's got a lifetime PB in the heat, and it put me in 5th place into the final. And then I went into the final and I finished and I looked and I was 8th. And I just remember getting out the pool and thinking, right, that was that, and everything was quiet, and my coach actually came down from his stand, came around to meet me and just gave me like the biggest hug. I got him to swim down the pool. You have to swim down straight away, swam, didn't cry, nothing. I was just like, right, okay. And then I got out and I had a message from Em, who was in Mexico at the wedding I was meant to be at, just saying how proud she was, and then I was just like, crying my eyes out. But it was, honestly, I went into trials thinking, nobody gets a second chance, so whatever happens, this is an achievement. This is like a massive achievement for me. I'm working full time. I was actually working 2 jobs. none of the other swimmers here, they're all young enough to be at home, they have their parents cooking for them, they have everything sorted for them. I was doing everything myself. So whatever happens, it's an achievement. But I didn't expect to feel so disappointed afterwards. I was so close again to my dream that actually it took me a few months to get my head around it. I still turned up to training, I still carried on, but I could tell my spark was dulled, and that was quite hard. I didn't expect to feel like that after. But I picked myself up, carried on. So then I was thinking about the 2018 Commonwealth Trials. So I carried on training, and then in 2017, in the February, I hurt my knee, and I hurt it quite bad, but I didn't know what was wrong with it. So I went to hospital, had it scanned, and they were like, "You've got tendonitis," and I was like, "I know I've got that, but there's definitely something else going on." But they said no. So I trained on it. That was actually, I've got this wrong, that was actually, I competed at Olympic trials with the bad knee. That was the February 2016, and it took another year for them to tell me that I had a meniscus tear and that they needed to operate on it. So I actually did compete at Olympic trials with a torn meniscus as well. So 2017 I had an operation. I was then out pretty much for 6 months, obviously doing some gym, some getting back in. By then I was coaching here. I was coaching full-time swimming as well at the same club, so I was coach and athlete at the same club. And you know when you just know, you know that your story is sort of on its way out, and I was actually a lot more passionate then about coaching and helping people. So in November 2017 I took the decision to retire again from swimming and focus on my coaching. And actually for my last competition, my last competition was at my home pool where I grew up. I was actually poorly, but I was like, I'm not racing. And I raced the season's best that year because it was my last race, and it was like the best way to bow out, and I'd rewritten my story and I finished on a high. And now I'm coaching, and it's led me all to here. So I don't think any of this would have happened without all of that. I also don't think any of that would have happened without all of CrossFit. So what I can say from this is, if you've got a dream and you think you've lost it, you might not have. Give it a go. If you really want it, go after it. And if there's hard times, just keep picking yourself up, because there will be hard times. Just keep picking yourself up, keep going after your dream, and you never know. It's never too late. You never know. So yeah, that's my story.
Right, so on that, we're going to get you warm for a workout.